Hey folks, welcome back. Let's be real. Right now it might feel like they don't care. Like they walked away without hesitation, without regret, without ever looking back. And that stings. It makes you question if you ever really mattered, if everything you shared was just one-sided, if they'll ever feel the same pain that you're feeling right now. But here's what most people don't realize. Loss doesn't hit in the moment. It doesn't hit when they leave. It hits in the silence, in the spaces where you used to be, in the moments they don't expect. See, at first they're distracted. They convince themselves they made the right choice. They fill their time with noise, with new people, with temporary highs to avoid the emptiness. But then, out of nowhere, it hits them. A song, a familiar place, a random thought late at night. And suddenly, the reality they tried to ignore becomes unavoidable. But here's the thing, you can't force this moment to happen. That's where most people go wrong. They chase, they reach out, they try to remind the other person of what they had, thinking that if they just say the right thing, if they just make them understand, it'll change everything. But it won't. Because loss is only felt when something is truly gone. And that's exactly what we're going to break down today. How to make your absence undeniable, how to shift the power dynamic in your favor, and most importantly, how to do it without ever chasing, without ever proving, and without ever needing their validation again. Let's get started. Number 1. The fall. When they walk away. Hey folks, let's start with the moment everything shifts. The fall. That exact point in time when they walk away, when they decide they're done, when they make you feel like you were never as important to them as they were to you. It hits hard, doesn't it? One day, you were part of their life, maybe even the center of it, and the next, silence, distance, indifference. Suddenly they act like you never existed, and you're left standing there, trying to figure out what went wrong. But here's the truth. The moment they leave isn't when they win. It's when they set themselves up for the very thing they think they're avoiding. See, people walk away for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's because they think they've outgrown you. Sometimes it's because they assume the grass is greener somewhere else. And sometimes it's just their ego convincing them that they don't need you as much as you need them. But what do all these reasons have in common? They're based on illusion. They think they have control. They think they can just leave, move on, forget, and never look back. They believe that their decision to walk away means they hold the power. And for a while, it might seem like that's true. They might look happy. They might seem unaffected. They might act like they don't care at all. And this is where most people make the biggest mistake. They react. They beg. They over-explain. They try to get closure, try to make sense of it all, try to remind the other person of what they're losing. Because in that moment, it feels like the only way to fix the pain is to get them to acknowledge it. But that's exactly what keeps you stuck. That's exactly what makes them feel like they made the right choice. Because the second you chase, the second you seek validation, the second you try to hold on to someone who already decided to leave, you give them all the power. And that's where things need to change. Because here's what they don't realize yet. Walking away might have felt like a choice, but feeling the loss? That's inevitable. At first they don't notice it. They're caught up in their own world, convinced that they made the right move. They don't feel the absence yet because they're too busy enjoying their perceived freedom. They assume you'll always be an option, that if they ever change their mind, you'll still be there. And for a while it works. They don't feel the pain. But here's the thing about absence. It doesn't hit immediately. It hits over time. It hits when they go to share something and realize you're not there. It hits when they have a rough day and suddenly they miss the way you used to understand them. It hits when they look around and realize that no one else sees them the way you did. Because people don't just forget real connections. They don't just erase the depth of what was once there. They suppress it, they distract themselves. But at some point, it catches up to them. And that's the moment when everything shifts. But for that moment to happen, you have to make a decision. To not be there when they finally realize it. To let them feel the weight of their own choices. To resist the urge to remind them of what they lost. To let silence do the talking. Because here's the truth. The pain of losing you will only hit them if you actually let them lose you. Now tell me, have you ever watched someone act like they didn't care, only for them to come back later? Drop your story in the comments. And if you're done chasing people who walked away, type, "I let them go." If this message is speaking to you, hit that like button and subscribe, because next, we're talking about the biggest trap most people fall into after being left behind, and how to avoid it. You don't want to miss it. Let's move on. Number 2, the trap. Why most people fail here. Hey folks, let's talk about the trap, the place where most people get stuck after someone walks away. Because here's the truth. Losing someone doesn't break you. The way you react to that loss does. And this is exactly where most people fail. See, when someone leaves, when they distance themselves, when they make it seem like you don't matter anymore, your brain goes into survival mode. You start searching for ways to fix it, to make them see what they lost, to somehow regain control of the situation. And that's where people fall into the biggest trap of all, chasing what left them. Maybe it starts small. You check their social media just to see if they're thinking about you. You replay old conversations in your head, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. You convince yourself that if you just say the right thing, if you just explain a little better, if you just show them what they're missing, they'll come back. But here's the problem. Every single one of those actions comes from a place of powerlessness. Because the moment you start chasing, even if it's subtle, even if it's just in your thoughts, you've already lost. Not because you aren't worth fighting for, but because you're giving all your power to someone who walked away. Think about it. If someone chooses to leave, if they decide that you're not worth their effort, why should they suddenly feel differently just because you're trying harder? That's not how human psychology works. If anything, the more you try, the more secure they feel in their decision to leave. This is why most people fail. They think that proving their worth will make someone see their value. But value isn't proven. It's felt. And people only feel the loss of something when they no longer have access to it. That's why silence is powerful. That's why indifference is powerful. Because when you don't react, when you don't try to fix things, when you simply step back and let them sit with their own choices, that's when the shift happens. But most people don't have the patience for this. They want immediate results. They want to see proof that the other person is struggling without them. And so they make desperate moves. They send one last text. They post things online hoping to get a reaction. They stalk their ex's new relationship, trying to figure out if they've been replaced. And what does all of that do? It keeps them stuck. Because every time you check, every time you reach out, every time you let them see that you're still emotionally invested, you reinforce the idea that they had the right to walk away. You give them certainty. You make them feel safe in their decision. But when you do nothing, when you disappear, when you show them through your actions that their choice has real consequences, that's when the regret starts creeping in. Because here's the truth. People don't regret losing you when you beg them to stay. They regret it when you act like their absence doesn't change a thing. So if you've been stuck in this trap, if you've been checking, overanalyzing, waiting for some kind of sign that they still care, it's time to stop. Not for them, for you, because you deserve better than sitting around waiting for someone who isn't choosing you. Now, let's hear it from you. Have you ever caught yourself in this trap before? Drop your story in the comments. And if today is the day you finally break free, type "I refuse to wait." And if this message is exactly what you needed to hear, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, because next, we're talking about how to take all of this pain and turn it into power. Trust me, you don't want to miss this next part. Let's move on. Number 3, the pivot, turning pain into power. Hey folks, let's talk about that moment when everything shifts, when the pain that once kept you up at night stops controlling you, when instead of letting it break you, you decide to use it. This is where real power begins. Because here's the thing, pain isn't what destroys people. It's what they do with it. Some let it consume them. They stay stuck, replaying old memories, waiting for someone who isn't coming back. Others, they take that pain and turn it into the fuel that drives them forward. Right now, you might feel like you're in the first category. Maybe you've been checking your phone, hoping for some kind of sign. Maybe you're still wondering if they miss you, if they regret leaving, if they even think about you at all. And that's normal. But here's the truth. None of that is going to help you. The only thing that's going to change your life? It's you deciding, right now, that you're done waiting. Pain is energy. And energy, when left uncontrolled, will eat you alive. But when you take that same energy and focus it on something meaningful, that's when everything shifts. That's when you stop being the person who was left behind and start becoming the person they can't ignore. Think about it. Some of the most unstoppable people didn't get there because life was easy. They got there because they took their hardest moments and used them. Athletes train harder after failure. Entrepreneurs build empires after rejection. People reinvent themselves after heartbreak. And the only difference between them and everyone else? They didn't stay stuck. They didn't let pain define them. So how do you pivot? How do you take all of this energy and make it work for you instead of against you? First, you stop fighting it. Most people try to numb pain. They jump into distractions. They pretend they don't care. But ignoring it doesn't make it go away. It just delays it. Instead, you face it. You let yourself feel it, really feel it, so that you can understand it, process it, and move through it instead of carrying it. Then you take that energy and redirect it. Maybe you hit the gym like never before. Maybe you start that business you've been talking about for years. Maybe you finally stop living small and start showing up as the person you were always meant to be. Whatever it is, you don't do it for them. You don't do it to prove a point. You do it because you refuse to let one chapter of your life define the whole story. And here's the kicker. When you stop focusing on them and start focusing on yourself, something strange happens. The silence that once felt unbearable, it starts to feel like peace. The absence that once hurt, it starts to feel like freedom. And before you know it, you're no longer waiting for them to regret leaving. Because you're too busy building something better. And ironically, that's when they usually start to notice. Not when you're trying to make them notice, not when you're posting things to get a reaction, but when you genuinely stop caring. That's when the weight of your absence hits them the hardest. But by then, you won't even need to look back. So what about you? Are you ready to pivot? Are you ready to take back control? Drop a comment and tell me, what's one way you're turning pain into power? And if today is the day you decide to stop waiting and start moving forward, type, I choose growth. And if this is exactly what you needed to hear, make sure to like and subscribe, because next we're talking about one of the most powerful moves you can make after walking away. The vanishing act. You don't want to miss this. Let's move on. Number 4, the vanishing act, mastering silence. Hey folks, let's talk about something that most people don't understand, the power of silence. Not blocking, not sending one last message, not trying to make them notice you, just pure, intentional disappearing from their world. I get it. Right now, you might feel like you need to do something, say something, prove something. It's human nature to want closure, to want answers, to want some kind of reaction that shows you meant something. But here's what most people don't realize. Silence is often the loudest answer you can give. When someone leaves, they assume they still have access to you. They think they can take their time, explore their options, maybe even come back whenever they feel like it. But what happens when they turn around and you're not there anymore? What happens when they expect a reaction and get nothing but silence? At first, they won't notice. They're caught up in their own world, convinced that you'll eventually check in. They assume they still have some level of control. And honestly, that's because most people do exactly what they expect. They reach out, they ask for closure, they try to have one last conversation that never actually changes anything. But when you do nothing, that's when the dynamic shifts. They start to wonder, why haven't you reached out? Are you really moving on? Have they lost you for good? And that uncertainty, that's what makes them feel something. That's what gets under their skin in a way words never could. See, when someone is used to having access to you, they take it for granted. They assume you'll always be there, that they can pick up where they left off whenever they decide to. But the moment you remove yourself completely, that's when they start to feel the reality of losing you. And the key here is that your silence has to be real. If you're just pretending, if you're checking their social media, if you're secretly waiting for them to notice, they'll feel that. But when you truly shift your focus away from them, that's when it becomes powerful. I know it's hard. I know the temptation to send that one last message is strong. But ask yourself, has chasing ever worked for you before? Has explaining your worth ever made someone value you more? Or has it only made them feel more secure in walking away? You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to remind them of what they lost. The absence of your presence will do that on its own. And when they do reach out, when they finally notice your silence, the way you respond or don't respond determines everything. Because most people make the mistake of breaking their silence too soon. They see that text, that notification, and they jump right back in. And just like that, the power shifts right back to where it was before. But when you can hold your silence, when you can resist the urge to react, that's when they truly start to feel it. That's when they realize that the door they thought was always open is now closed. And here's the best part. By the time they do notice, by the time they do come back around, you'll be so far ahead in your own life that you won't even need their validation anymore. So, tell me, have you ever had someone suddenly come back after you went silent? Drop your story in the comments. And if today is the day you stop chasing and start mastering silence, type, "I walk away." If this is what you needed to hear, hit that like button and subscribe, because next we're talking about what happens after the silence, the moment you start rebuilding from the ashes. You don't want to miss it. Let's move on. Number 5, the Phoenix, rebuilding from the ashes. Hey folks, let's talk about what happens after the storm, after the silence, after the moment you realize they're not coming back, and even if they did, it wouldn't change anything. This is the turning point. The moment where you either stay stuck in the past or decide to rise from it. Because here's the truth. Loss doesn't define you. What you do after it does. Some people stay in the wreckage, trying to piece together something that's already broken. Others, they take those ashes and build something entirely new. Right now, you might still be feeling the weight of what happened. The disappointment, the anger, the emptiness of realizing that someone who once meant everything to you now feels like a stranger. And that's real. That's valid. But what's next? Because sitting in that pain won't heal you. Waiting for them to realize your worth won't heal you. The only thing that will? Deciding that you are more than what you've lost. And that starts with letting go of the version of yourself that was willing to settle. The version of you that accepted less than they deserved. The version that was waiting for someone else to see their value instead of recognizing it themselves. That person, they don't exist anymore. So what does rebuilding actually look like? It's not about revenge. It's not about showing them you're better off without them. It's about creating a life that feels so fulfilling, so full, that whether or not they regret leaving becomes completely irrelevant. The first step is shifting your focus. Right now, you might still be looking back, still wondering if they miss you, still checking their social media, still trying to decode their silence. But none of that is helping you move forward. So the first real move? Cut the ties. Not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. That means no more checking, no more waiting, no more giving them free rent in your mind. Because the second you stop making them the center of your world, you start putting yourself back in control. The next step? Rebuilding from within. And this isn't about distractions. It's not about keeping busy just to avoid thinking about them. It's about real transformation. What do you want your life to look like now? Not for them, not to prove anything, but for you. Maybe it's getting into the best shape of your life, not for revenge, but because taking care of yourself is a form of self-respect. Maybe it's diving into something you've always wanted to do, whether it's starting a business, traveling, or just finally prioritizing your own growth. Maybe it's simply learning how to be at peace with yourself without needing external validation to feel whole. And here's the thing, when you start truly focusing on yourself, something shifts. The silence that once felt unbearable starts to feel like peace. The absence that once hurt starts to feel like freedom. And before you know it, you're no longer waiting for them to regret losing you, because you've built a life where their absence doesn't even matter anymore. And that's when the real irony kicks in. Because the moment you truly move on, the moment you stop looking back, that's usually when they start to notice. They thought you'd always be there. They thought they had time, but when they turn around, you're gone. And that's when they feel it. But by then, you won't even need their regret. So let me ask you, what's one thing you're doing right now to rebuild yourself? Drop it in the comments. And if today is the day you stop looking back and start moving forward, type, "I choose growth." If this message hit home, make sure to like and subscribe, because next we're talking about something even more powerful: mastering indifference. When you stop reacting, when you stop seeking closure, when you truly stop caring, that's when the power shifts completely. You don't want to miss it. Let's move on. Number 6, the unshaken mind. Indifference is power. Hey folks, let's talk about something that changes everything. Indifference. Not fake indifference. Not pretending you don't care while secretly hoping they notice. I mean real, unshaken, nothing they do affects you anymore indifference. Because that's power. Right now, you might still be waiting for something. Maybe an apology, a sign that they regret it, some kind of proof that you mattered. And that's normal. We're wired to seek closure, to want answers. But the truth is, the moment you stop looking for any of that, the moment you stop needing anything from them, that's when the power shifts. People expect a reaction. They expect you to be watching, waiting, overanalyzing. And when you don't, when you go silent, when you truly move on without making a scene, that's when they feel it. Think about it. When was the last time you really didn't care about someone? Not in a way where you were trying to act cool, but in a way where they weren't even a thought in your day? When someone genuinely doesn't matter to you, you don't stalk their social media. You don't wonder if they're thinking about you. You don't spend time crafting the perfect response if they reach out. And that's what makes people uncomfortable. Most people hold on to pain because it still connects them to the past. Even anger, even resentment. It's all just another way of staying emotionally invested. But when you finally detach, when you reach a place where their actions don't trigger anything in you anymore, that's when you're truly free. And let's be real, getting to that point isn't easy. It's a process. It starts with shifting your focus. Because indifference isn't about ignoring them while secretly hoping they notice. It's about filling your life with so much purpose, so much growth, so much self-respect that the past becomes irrelevant. So if you're still checking their page, still replaying old conversations, still looking for signs, ask yourself why. What do you think you'll find? And more importantly, how is it serving you? Because every second spent watching them is a second you're not using to build something better for yourself. The real test of indifference isn't when you're alone. It's when they come back around. Because they will. At some point, they'll test the waters. Maybe it's a random text. Maybe it's a like on your post. Maybe it's just their name popping up in your notifications. And in that moment, everything in you might want to react, to analyze what it means, to take it as proof that they still care. But here's the thing. If they truly wanted to be in your life, they never would have left. So you let it go. You don't respond. You don't overthink. You don't give them the reaction they're hoping for. Because your silence, it says more than any words ever could. And that's when they feel it. Not when you try to make them. Not when you play games. But when you genuinely don't care anymore. And by then, it won't even matter to you if they regret it or not. So tell me, have you ever reached that point where someone just stopped mattering to you? Drop your story in the comments. And if today is the day you finally let go, type, "I don't need closure." If this hit home for you, make sure to like and subscribe, because next, we're talking about the moment they realize their mistake and why it always happens too late. You won't want to miss it. Let's move on. Number 7. The return. When they realize their mistake. Hey folks, let's talk about something that always happens, even when you think it won't. The return. That moment when they suddenly show up again, acting like they never left, like nothing happened, like they didn't make the mistake of walking away in the first place. At first, it might feel good. After all, this is what you were waiting for, right? Proof that they finally see your value. proof that they regret losing you. But here's the thing, by the time they come back, you'll realize something important. It's too late. Because when someone leaves, when they treat you like an option, when they act like your presence was replaceable, what they're really telling you is you were never a priority to them, not in the way you deserved. And when they come back, it's rarely because they had some deep, life-changing realization. It's because they lost control. People don't miss you when you're still available. They miss you when they realize they no longer have access to you. At first, they didn't feel it. They were confident in their decision. They thought they could move on, replace you, forget you. But then something shifted. Maybe they started seeing patterns in other people that made them compare. Maybe they realized that the connection they had with you wasn't as easy to find as they thought. Or maybe they assumed you'd always be there, waiting, and now you're not. And that's the moment they panic. That's the moment the weight of their mistakes starts to sink in. But here's what you have to ask yourself. Why does it take losing you for them to see your worth? Why weren't you enough when they had you? Why did it take silence, distance, and your absence for them to realize what they had? Because someone who truly values you, they don't need to lose you to see your worth. They don't need to test your loyalty, to play games, to disappear just to figure out that you mattered. And yet, here they are, reappearing, sliding into your messages, liking your posts, sending that casual, "Hey, how have you been?" text, like nothing happened. So now what? Do you respond? Do you ignore it? Do you give them another chance? Here's the truth. You don't owe them anything. Not closure, not conversation, not an explanation for why you've moved on. You don't need to prove a point. You don't need to be petty. But you also don't need to entertain someone who only realized your value when it was convenient for them. By the time they come back, you should be so far ahead, so focused on yourself, so deeply invested in your own growth, that their return doesn't shake you, that it doesn't make you second-guess your decision to walk away, that it doesn't pull you back into something that already showed you its true colors. Because the reality is, most people don't come back because they love you. They come back because they lost control. So instead of wondering why they returned, ask yourself why you should care. Ask yourself if going back would actually serve you, or if it's just the comfort of familiarity pulling you in. Ask yourself if you're the same person who once tolerated their absence, or if you finally reached a point where you deserve more. Because someone who left once, they'll leave again. And the only way to break that cycle is to not let them back in. So tell me, have you ever had someone try to come back after walking away? Drop your story in the comments. And if today is the day you stop accepting apologies without changed behavior, type, "I don't go back." If this message hit home, make sure to like and subscribe, because next we're talking about the ultimate power move, choosing yourself over everything else. You won't want to miss it. Let's move on. Number 8, the Stoic choice, the ultimate power move. Hey folks, let's talk about what real power looks like. Not the kind that comes from making them miss you. Not the kind that comes from proving you've moved on. Not even the kind that comes from getting closure. The real power move? Walking away. For good. Not as a tactic, not as a way to manipulate their emotions, not to make them chase you, but because you've finally reached a point where their absence no longer affects your peace. And when you get there, when you truly, deeply, and fully let go, that's when everything shifts. Most people don't understand this. They think power is about control, about making the other person regret their decisions. But the truth is, the strongest move you can make is the one that doesn't require an audience. It's the quiet choice to prioritize yourself, not out of anger, and not out of bitterness, but out of a deep understanding that you are worth more than waiting around for someone who couldn't see your value the first time. I know this isn't easy. Letting go feels unnatural at first. Your mind still wants to check in, to see if they've noticed your absence, to wonder if they're thinking about you. That need for validation, for proof that you mattered, is what keeps most people stuck. And I get it. You invested time, emotions, energy into this person. And now, what? You're just supposed to walk away like it meant nothing? But that's where most people get it wrong. Because walking away doesn't mean it didn't matter. It means you've finally accepted that it's over, that no amount of waiting, hoping, or overanalyzing will change what has already happened. And once you stop needing an outcome, once you stop looking for signs, stop hoping for an apology, stop expecting some grand moment of realization from them, that's when you actually free yourself. So how do you get there? How do you stop caring for real, not just pretending to? It starts with where you put your focus. Every second you spend thinking about them is energy you're not spending on yourself. Every time you check their page, you're keeping yourself tied to a reality that no longer exists. Every time you replay old conversations in your head, wondering what you could have done differently, you're giving away your power. And the truth is, you don't need to understand why they left. You don't need to know if they regret it, because the only thing that matters now is what you do next. The moment you stop waiting, the moment you stop wondering, the moment you decide that your life is moving forward with or without them, that's when the real power shift happens. And something interesting happens when you make this choice. You start focusing on yourself in a way you never have before. You start taking all of that energy that was once directed at them, checking, wondering, waiting, and you start using it to build something for yourself. Maybe it's your health, maybe it's your career, maybe it's just waking up and choosing peace over chaos. But whatever it is, the more you focus on it, the more you'll realize how little they actually mattered in the grand scheme of things. And that's when they feel it, because they expected you to still be there, waiting, hoping, still emotionally available in some way. They thought they had time, but when they finally look for you, you're gone. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. And that's when the reality of losing you sets in. But by then, it won't even matter to you, because you'll be too busy living your life to care about whether or not they regret losing you. And that's the beauty of true detachment. It's not about pretending you're over it, it's about actually being over it. No more looking back, no more wondering what could have been, no more needing validation from someone who didn't see your worth when they had the chance. Because you're no longer in a place where their choices affect you. You've moved on to something bigger. And when you reach that point, you realize that the most powerful thing you could have ever done was walk away without needing to be noticed. So let me ask you, are you ready to make that choice? To finally let go? To step into your power? To walk away with confidence and never look back? Drop a comment and tell me how you're reclaiming your energy. And if today is the day you stop letting the past define you, type, "I choose me." If this message spoke to you, make sure to like and subscribe, because next, we're talking about the final step, becoming truly untouchable. You don't want to miss it. Let's move on. Number 9. The conclusion. Becoming untouchable. Hey folks, this is it, the final step. The moment when you stop just healing, stop just moving on, and step into something much bigger, becoming untouchable. Not untouchable in the sense that nothing ever affects you, because let's be real, you're human. You'll still feel things, you'll still have moments of doubt. But the difference, those moments won't control you anymore. They won't shake your foundation. They won't pull you back into a place where someone else's actions dictate your emotions. Most people go through life reacting. They react to rejection, they react to silence, they react to the way others treat them, constantly adjusting their energy based on whether or not they're being validated. But when you become untouchable, you don't react. You decide. Think about the strongest people you know, not physically, but mentally, emotionally. The ones who walk into a room with a quiet confidence that doesn't need to be proven. The ones who never seem desperate for attention, who don't play games, who don't chase validation. They aren't heartless. They aren't cold. They've just mastered the one thing that changes everything: self-control. And when you have that, no one can shake you. So how do you actually become untouchable? How do you reach that place where you no longer need validation, where you no longer care if someone regrets losing you, where you no longer feel the pull to check, to react, to wonder? It starts with recognizing one simple truth. You are enough, exactly as you are. Not when they come back, not when they realize their mistake, not when you finally win by making them miss you. You are enough right now. And the moment you stop seeking external proof of that, you step into a level of power most people never reach. See, most people live in cycles. They seek validation, they get it, they feel good for a while, and then they need more. And when they don't get it, they spiral. But when you're untouchable, you break that cycle completely. You stop depending on someone else's attention to feel valuable. You stop needing closure to move forward. You stop looking outside of yourself for something that was always meant to come from within. This isn't about pretending you don't care. It's not about acting unbothered while secretly hoping they notice. It's about genuinely, deeply knowing that their actions no longer have the power to affect you. And that's the moment you become free. Because when you're truly untouchable, people feel it, they sense it, they see it in the way you carry yourself, in the way you don't flinch when they try to get a reaction out of you, in the way you don't fall into the same old traps. They expect you to still be watching, still be waiting, still be emotionally invested. But when they realize that you're not, that's when they start to feel everything they thought they never would. And the best part? By then, you won't even care. You won't need their regret. You won't need their attention because you'll be too busy living, too focused on your own growth, your own peace, your own future. And that's the real win. Not making them miss you. Not proving a point, but reaching a level where their presence or absence no longer changes a thing for you. So this is it. The final moment. The shift from healing to transformation. The moment where you decide, once and for all, that you're done looking back, that you're done wondering, that you're done giving your energy to people who never deserved it in the first place. And when you make that choice, you become untouchable. All right, folks, this is it. You've made it through the journey, from pain to power, from waiting to walking away, from reacting to deciding. And now you step into the version of yourself that doesn't just move on, but elevates beyond anything that once held you back. No more waiting for them to notice. No more seeking validation. No more wondering if they regret losing you. Because the moment you stop needing any of that, you win. So take this with you. Your worth isn't determined by who stays or who leaves. It's determined by you. By how you choose to carry yourself, by what you allow, by the standards you refuse to lower. And when you hold that kind of power, no one can shake you. If this message resonated with you, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. And before you go, drop a comment and tell me, what's the one thing you're leaving behind today? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.